letter from the Gantry.
I hope it's worth the wait. Thanks, Neil. The London Stadium is far from my favourite football ground. The commentary position is far away from the pitch, with the need to peer over the athletics track, for which, of course, the stadium was constructed in the first place. Yet there is something very warm and endearing about covering West Ham games. As I did for their recent win over Leicester City, I'm scheduled to be back there on an upcoming Monday when Newcastle United will be in town. The stadium has plenty of space for hospitality, and one attraction on offer as well as the match is the presence of former players to chat with the fans. It happens up and down the country, of course, but West Ham United do it particularly well. The press room for these ambassadors is now their dressing room. Not that there's any changing into kit, but there is a sense of a warm-up for their social skills as they prepare for their individual assignments. They all love a chat. I've commentated on matches involving almost all of these ex-Hammers, and nostalgia reigns for a good while before the responsibility of that evening's broadcast means a refocus on the present rather than the past. My co-commentator for the Leicester game was a key member of the Foxes squad, which won in chronological order the Premier League, the FA Cup and the Community Shield. Mark Albrighton only retired at the end of last season. He's 35 and I was able to introduce him to the ex-West Ham players, most of whom he'd never heard of. There were a couple of exceptions, of course. The two youngest, Matt Jarvis, very much a friend of the joy of football, who's a couple of years older than Mark. That was a case of wingers reunited. And Paul Konchesky, now 43, who was a Leicester City teammate for a while. The rest was a Hammers history lesson, which I thought I would share with you. At the other end of the age range, 81-year-old Brian Deere, a forward from the 1960s, playing alongside West Ham's holy trinity of Bobby Moore, Geoff Hurst and Martin Peters. In April 1965, almost 60 years ago, Brian scored 5 goals in a 20-minute spell either side of half-time in a First Division match against West Bromwich Albion. The following month, he was in the Hammers 11, which won the European Cup Winners' Cup at Wembley. Alan Taylor, who's 71, has hardly changed from the fresh-faced forward who also achieved a remarkable scoring feat for the East London club in 1975, 50 years ago. 2 goals in the FA Cup quarter-final to beat Arsenal, 2 in the semi-final replay against Ipswich, and 2 in the final itself to defeat Fulham. No other Hammer scored in those 3 vital games. Their FA Cup goal scorer prior to that was Keith Robson, who'd netted in round 5, and he's an ambassador too. His claim to fame are goals in the semi-final and final of the 75-76 Cup Winners' Cup, which his great pal Alan Taylor had earned qualification for with that 6-goal salvo the previous season. Keith, also 71 now, but you would never guess it. West Ham won the FA Cup again in 1980 as a Division 2 side, and from that team, midfielder Jeff Pike, who's 68, and Scottish right-back Ray Stewart, now 65, were in ambassadorial attendance. Both were first-team regulars for over a decade. Jeff steeped in the footballing philosophy of the club. Ray renowned for his explosively powerful penalty kicks. He took well over 80 and had a 90% conversion rate. He talks fondly of a Wembley penalty success at the 1981 League Cup final, when he fooled the Liverpool and England goalkeeper Ray Clements by side-footing instead of blasting a late West Ham equaliser from the spot to earn a replay. Tony Gale has been a long-time friend and commentary colleague, and he still mixes his stints on the mic with mixing in the London Stadium lounges. Another 65-year-old, he was a cornerstone of the side, which ended up in 3rd place in the 85-86 First Division campaign, the club's highest ever finish. Tony started all 42 league matches in that historic season and helped in defence by a youngster who nailed down a spot in the second half of the campaign. George Paris, who has now turned 60, was suddenly a star back then. I went with a film crew to interview him at his family home for the 1980s favourite television football show Saint and Greavesy. Always nice to reminisce with George about that. There was a television connection too with ex-goalkeeper Jimmy Walker, who spent 5 years with the Hammers between 2004 and 2009 and was another back at the club on this particular evening. He earned instant adulation early in his time with the Hammers with a penalty save in a League Cup tie at Chelsea at the away end, and from none other than Frank Lampard, who of course had history with West Ham. A while after the occasion, I found some coverage of Jimmy's big moment, and he can now relive it at his leisure. Other faces from the West Ham story also on duty. Alan Dickens, who was a regular in midfield in that third-place team. The always cheerful former left-back Rufus Brevitt. And Mark Robson, now the elite under-21 coach at the club, who worked with the first team last season under David Moyes. They all made a mark as players for West Ham. As an ambassadorial team, they are now winners every week.